You can look away, but that won't make it any easier to forget. Welcome to WatchMojo UK, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 awkward moments on The Jonathan Ross Show. Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. For this list, we're focusing on the most painstakingly cringy moments from the popular chat show starring one of Britain's very best hosts, Jonathan Ross, from uncomfortable questions to uninterested guests. We'll be including clips from both his former show, Friday Night with Jonathan Ross, and his current one, The Jonathan Ross Show. So enjoy, if you can.
No, have you played tennis? Look, how small are the grapes in your house?
Number 10, Blunt Justice, Friday Night with Jonathan Ross.
Apparently, Reservoir Dogs was initially going to be called Righteous Colours.
No, it wasn't.
British sarcasm can sometimes be lost in translation over the Atlantic. Here, Ross starts building a gag based around one of the show's researchers, giving him bad background info on guest Quentin Tarantino, like the fact that Pulp Fiction was almost called Blunt Justice.
You heard wrong.
I'm sorry. You know, I hate because I get given this information and it's embarrassing.
You got taken, yeah.
It soon reaches a very Tarantino-esque climax that has Ross pretending to shoot an employee, and it's about here that we can see Tarantino catching on to the fact that it's actually a joke. He looks a little awkward and, to be honest, not very impressed. I mean, the guy adores cinema and wants to talk seriously about it. Never mind, eh? Number 9. Phil is bored. The Jonathan Ross Show.
No, John! We're still chatting over it.
Phil Collins is a bona fide music legend, both with the band Genesis and without. But no matter how much a celebrity is being praised for their genius during an interview, sometimes they just don't want to be there. And that certainly looked to be the case when Collins sat on Ross's sofa in 2016.
Okay. John, lovely. Don't get carried away. Sorry.
In one segment, they have Collins guessing famous drum patterns to see if he can guess the song, some of which are his own tracks. During the guessing game, Collins fidgets in his seat and looks totally uninterested. You half expect him to check his watch and make an early dart.
Let's do one more. There's one more to be the last one because I particularly like this piece. So here you go, John, if you're ready.
Number 8, Never Have I Ever, The Jonathan Ross Show.
Harry, what are you waiting for? Come on, we know the answer.
Some pop stars will go out their way to look as rock and roll as possible in interviews. Case in point, One Direction on The Jonathan Ross Show. I mean, I guess it depends on how cynical you are, but the whole Never Have I Ever section of this interview seemed a little contrived. It had the young band members quizzed on things like drugs and public nudity, to which they nervously twisted their answer paddles around to the roar of the audience.
I have never smoked a joint.
So, the game is designed to make them look cool? Is that it? You might have a hard time convincing some. Fellow guest and comedian Michael McIntyre sums up the situation nicely with this line.
They're not going to do that! They're media-trained megastars!
Number 7, Katie and Peter. Friday Night with Jonathan Ross.
It's called... Why do I always have to do the promotion?
Because if I
okay, I'll quickly say it.
Playful couple interviews on TV are always a delight to watch. But when one partner dominates the airtime and belittles the other, things can get a little rocky.
I thought this would be tempting enough, you know, my wife is.
He's bored of seeing us now.
Hold on. You're giving me...
Speaking about tabloid rumours and their new TV show, Katie Price and Peter Andre constantly shift from happy couple to bickering teenagers, with pretty much all the venom aimed at Peter. This includes Price saying that she doesn't need anything off Andre, dismissing him without even looking at him.
Jonathan's the only man allowed to go near. How dare
But hold
you?
it, he's offering... now, am I correct in this? And we have witnesses.
Fame goes to some people's heads, even those who are famous for, well, nothing really. Number 6, I Will Phone My Wife, Friday night with Jonathan Ross. In the heat of a comedic moment, it's very easy for a joke to go too far. And that's definitely what happened here.
If you want to have sex, I'll phone my wife. If she gave me permission, I will you, yes, sir.
Somehow, getting onto the topic of sex, Ross suggests, out of the blue, that guest Gwyneth Paltrow clearly wants to sleep with him, and that he'll phone his wife to get permission to do so. But it's the way he says it which makes it kind of hard to watch.
Because you know what? You are so nicely. Oh. And clearly, you're gagging for it.
Although following it up with lines like, clearly you're gagging for it, it becomes instantly clear that Ross wants to backtrack and carry on with some serious questions. But invitations like that tend to linger a little.
Hang on. just...
Number 5, Ed Sheeran's early demos, The Jonathan Ross Show.
And do you still have some of those old CDs that you couldn't sell?
Yeah, I do. My mum eBays them.
First off, we gotta tip our hat to Ed for his willingness to embarrass himself here. But just because his discomfort is self-inflicted doesn't make it any less difficult to watch. Attempting to prove that talent is something you learn rather than something you're born with, Ed plays an old recording of himself on his phone, and it's bloody awful. We collectively sit with bated breath as the song starts playing, and when we hear his scratchy voice breaking, it's cringe city.
I'm addicted
Oh.
to
And then.
but I'm
We've all had to listen to someone's less than great singing voice at some point, and this just gave us flashbacks.
After that, you practiced.
I did. Yeah, no, I probably needed it.
Number 4, Sean's apology, The Jonathan Ross Show.
When it blew up, you know, I don't think I reacted in the correct manner. I didn't know what to do.
Celebrities apologising on chat shows rarely comes across as sincere. But with that said, Sean Walsh's apology on The Jonathan Ross Show about him cheating on his girlfriend did seem like it came from the heart.
If I could go back in time, you know, behave differently and treat her differently, but unfortunately, all I can be is as sorry as I am and as regretful as I am.
That's not the awkward part, though. The awkward part is how out of the blue the whole segment was, and the way the other guests sit motionless as the show takes a dramatic mood shift.
Exactly, because, you know, she didn't sign up to that, Rebecca didn't sign up to that, I did.
Megastars will.i.am, Samuel L. Jackson and Brie Larson were amongst the stars twiddling their thumbs, and allegedly complained afterwards, asking why they had to be there to endure the awkward confession. And yeah, we agree. At least we could change the channel. Number 3, Chris Rock and Slurs, Friday night with Jonathan Ross. A big part of being a chat show host is asking the difficult questions, but there are ways of doing that.
I know you did a whole section on the show a way back about how you don't like, you're a black person, but you don't like...
In this interview with comedian Chris Rock, Ross asks him about his use of the N-word, but instead of simply referring to it as the N-word, he straight up says it.
Did that cause problems for you? Was it...
The whole thing seems unnecessary and inappropriate, even if Rock shrugs it off. But what really amplifies the awkwardness is Tom Hanks' reaction backstage as he is somehow dragged into the conversation, silently kicking and screaming. Hanks' screwed up face and reserved demeanour perfectly sums up how we feel watching it. Jeez.
Go on, Tom, let's hear one for the team. Come on.
Number 2, Ross and Conter clash heads. The Jonathan Ross Show.
She refused to attend the press conference afterwards and she got fined as a result, didn't she?
I heard that, but I also heard that was not the first time she did that, so I don't think it was personal.
Speaking of difficult questions, Ross attempts to seemingly play devil's advocate again here as he quizzes tennis player Johanna Conter on a potentially spiteful gesture made by competitor Venus Williams. And it's pretty clear here that Ross is trying to stir up a hornet's nest and get Conter to hit back. but she deflects and gets pretty annoyed in the process.
She's a really good person and she's a great competitor, so I'd be foolish to say anything bad.
As the interview goes on, an aggressive atmosphere grows between Ross and Conter, and guest Rob Brydon too, ultimately resulting in her saying things like, "That's a stupid question." Following her time on the show, social media went nuts, with people unsure about whether Conter was aware of how blunt and cold she was being. Game Ross.
You see, you always have to spoil it, don't you, Rob?
Number 1. The Margaret Thatcher question. Friday night with Jonathan Ross.
Can I call you D to the AVE?
Yes. Arguably Jonathan Ross's edgiest question ever. And who better to aim it at than then Conservative leader David Cameron? While discussing politics, specifically former Conservative leader Margaret Thatcher, Ross shoots off on a tangent about whether Cameron ever fantasized about the Iron Lady.
Margaret Thatcher? In a carnal fashion. As indeed we all did back then.
Of course, Cameron doesn't answer, but that doesn't discourage Ross. The comedian just won't let it go, and eventually comes out with this bombshell about masturbation.
They voted for these things.
But did you or did you not ever have a wank thinking of Thatcher?
You can almost sympathise with Cameron here. How do you possibly answer that question? Well, I tell you how, he could have just said no. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo UK, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.